Welcome back to the channel. This is JT at Rubber City Motoring. Obviously, we're under the hood of the Corvette here. You know, these cars, anytime you buy an older car, doesn't matter mileage, age, anything, in my opinion, the fluid and everything is always suspect. So if we're under the hood here, obviously the one that everybody does, the engine oil. It seems like most people are pretty good with oil changes, especially on we'll say a nicer, more expensive car like this. This car, when I looked at the Carfax when I got it, it had something like, since 1999, like 34 oil changes, because they're all logged in Carfax, at least when it's done at like a dealership or something like that. That's all that's really in there, though, and that's fine, but I'm guessing that every other fluid in this car has never been touched, which, once again, it has 37,000 miles on it, probably doesn't need it, but age comes into a factor with fluids and that whole deal. So I'm slowly working my way through the different fluids and messing with them. I've cycled a roughly 1 quart of power steering fluid through that system, and that's as simple as extracting stuff out of the reservoir, filling it in, and then it works its way through. You could do a complete drain and refill, but to me, I think just doing that every so often is a good practice. Antifreeze hasn't been touched yet. You can almost spot it in there. It is still orange. It's 90s Dex Cool, which, once again, it's probably fine. Most of these cars never see that changed, and with the miles, it's probably fine, but I worry about that, and I worry about the hoses, too, because, I mean, they just have a life, and I don't really feel like being stranded somewhere, so that'll be one day. This clutch is hydraulic. It does have a tricky method of bleeding it, like my Camaro was, but you can do the move where you suck what's in the reservoir out without introducing air, add fluid, pump the pedal a bunch of times, and you're good to go with that, just kind of cycling new fluid through there. Today, though, what we're going to do is look at this brake fluid, and brake fluid is, I think, one of the easier ones to change as long as you are smart about it. As you can see here, if I'll jiggle this a little bit, that is black in there. It's full, but it is very dark, and let's look in the cap here. Precisely. It gets old. It just, whether it's the line, the rubber, anything degrades in there, even, you know, dust or whatever gets inside there, dirt, and we got a problem. And it works. They work fine. It stops. But if you're somebody that wants things to work like new and continue working like new, you need to keep up with this stuff. What we're going to work with here today, Redline sent this stuff over, their RL600 brake fluid .4. It is a synthetic, and that does worry me a bit because synthetic brake fluid, I don't know, you just hear things about it. It's not the best for a daily, it's not the best for this type of application, but they sent this over. It's a pretty heavy-duty, high-performance brake fluid. This little bottle, I believe, was $20. So what we're going to do is a pressure bleed today. I'm going to show you a rough idea how that works and kind of go from there. But hopefully just to cycle out some of that nasty fluid, and you can compare good fluid versus garbage fluid here as we do this on the Corvette. If you've never pressure bled before, this is a crash course in that. I'm not going to go through step by step, but I'll put some links to what I'm using below. So let's get this started. As I stated, Redline did send this over. This is a sponsored video, and I really don't know how good that fluid is, but brake fluid is it's an interesting one. It can be as good as it is for the application. I've heard people say the cheap non-synthetic stuff works just as good as the overly expensive stuff, but it comes down to boiling point and all that, which we'll talk about on this here. So let's get going. I am totally guessing that if you're a brake fluid expert connoisseur, you're gonna pick this stuff apart and say it's not the best, it's overpriced, whatever you want to say, that's fine. It is available pretty easily on Amazon, Summit Racing, and that. I wanted to go through and compare a few different things here, though, and I don't have these totally memorized. This is your basic AutoZone .3 standard brake fluid. Now, there's the difference between wet and dry, boiling point. As the brake fluid gets older, more used, it does get water in it, just whether it's in gestates, whether it boils and it gets to that point and water appears in it, but that's sort of when you flush it, because you don't water in your brake lines. Like if you replaced all your brake lines with water instead of brake fluid, it really wouldn't work that well. So the less water in there, the better. This has a wet boiling point, and it says minimum 284 degrees. So after that, you're going to start to notice spongy pedal and all that good stuff. Now this stuff I actually bought for my clutch. This says, they advertise dry on this one. This one doesn't say wet, but the dry boiling point, as in brand new out of the package, is a 446 degrees. That was a fairly cheap bottle, but it does say super heavy duty brake fluid. I bought that non-synthetic for my clutch fluid just to throw in there. Now the Redline RL600, this one, if we look at the back, this has a dry boiling point of 600 degrees, wet boiling point of 400. So it's exceeding lots of requirements and will be good for high heat applications, anything. It is high performance synthetic for track and street use. 16 ounces per bottle. We'll put a link below on there, but you can see the difference on it, and we're gonna start to pump this through the Corvette here. I am gonna use a speed bleeder. I do have these. Oh my gosh, I do have these little guys which you basically hang from your, if you want to hang it, but that's like a catcher for when you pump the stuff through. And I'll show you this setup here. It's pretty slick. You just have to get it all set up, and it's not something you're gonna do every single day or every single week or anything, but when you do get it going here, it's very, very smooth and fast. You can also do the move where you just crack a bleeder and go that way. Finally, we're not going to get into on this car the ABS modules and pumping the servos and that. You know, eventually it will cycle through those, but my goal here is to get 75% of the nasty fluid out of the system and then just sort of, you know, have it mix in there. This isn't, once again, a complete flush, but this is a better than what it was type scenario, which I think this stuff over the factory fill from 1999 with water, with dirt, with whatever in it, this is going to be worlds better, putting it through the paces. So here we go. There's a lot of ways you can do this. According to the internet, and I checked a few sites, most people say to start left rear on this car, and I've seen right rear. I've seen, it kind of varies, but either way, I mean, I'm starting left rear, and then I'm going to work my way through it. I'm going to jack it up and take the wheels off and do it. I mean, you can do it underneath if you lift the whole car up, but this makes it a little easier to get the bleeder bottle in there to kind of take a look-see and come back and forth type thing. So I'm going to take this off. I've never had the tires off this car, so jack pucks naturally, and then you just sort of obviously jack up your car and pull the wheel. It gives you access to the bleeder, and you can kind of inspect things as well while you're doing this process. Lugs are off, 19mm socket. Here we go. It's apparently new tires that previous owner put on. People ask about this one. Firestone Indy 500. Seems all right for, I mean, for the cost and that. But what's cool about, we kind of talked on my previous videos, these wheels are like perfect. It's sad because they're one of the uglier C5 wheels. They haven't aged the best, but still they're fine. And then let's take a peek in here. I don't have a light with me, but you can kind of take a quick look around. Bleeder's back there. It has a little cover on it. I'll come back in here with a light and show you my setup for bleeding. Rubber line. Stretched pretty good right there in this position. That's interesting. There's the titanium exhaust we put on. I just did sway bar end links. Factory Z51 shocks are on there. For the most part, everything on this car should be pretty clean. At one point somebody did brakes front and rear because these drilled and slotted aren't stock. Looks like they did attempt to paint or do something there so it doesn't rust in view, and looks to be quite a bit of pad left. You would expect that on the rears, especially if they did them recently. So alright, let's get this set up and I'll show you what's what back here. No matter what car you do this on, take care of paint, surrounding areas. Brake fluid is kind of corrosive. It will ruin your paint. I mean, not instantly, but it definitely will remove some of the shine and that sort of thing. First order of business though, you want to try to get as much of this nasty stuff out of here as possible so you don't have to cycle that through. So a small syringe or a fluid extractor, something like that is fine. Don't go crazy though. You don't want to ingest any air. I mean, if you do, I guess you're bleeding it anyways, but still, you know, less air the better, because this really still is a factory bleed if you think about it. So I'm gonna extract what I can out of there, the nasty stuff, and it's nasty, so it's gonna be gross, and then we'll go from there. But should be a pretty simple process here. Towels out, everything's good to go now. So I'm going to show you this here as I extract. What's interesting is the stuff that's kind of coming out. It's not as bad as it looks up here, but it's clearly old. It very well might have been done before, but you can see as it comes out this tube. Let me try to do this one-handed here. Not really too well. It's kind of still got an amber color to it, but it's definitely gross. So I'm not as concerned as I was when I started this video, but it's still yucky. So we're gonna flush it out. One little trick I like to do first, even though we just evacuated or removed all sorts of nasty fluid out of there, and we're gonna pressure bleed new fluid into it, I like to top this off, because now I know it's starting fresh. You're already starting to introduce new fluid into the system, and then it kind of gives it, we'll say, a head start from the pressure bleeder. So just very carefully without spilling it. And since it's going to be pumped through, I'm going to probably fill it pretty close to the top without making a mess here, because you can see the max line. Yeah, right about there is fine. And that took quite a bit, but these bottles aren't very big. These are 16 ounces, and I have 3 of them, so we'll see how far that'll take us in the pressure bleeder. So let's get into that thing and set all that up. This reservoir is pretty big. You know, you could fill it to the brim, and I did the Trailblazer, which is a much bigger car, and that was my first experience with the power bleeding system. Man, the fluid just went right through. I was very, very surprised at that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with 2 of these, whatever's left from the one we just dumped up there, and then 1 more full one. What's nice is this fluid is pretty clear, so it should help us as far as visualizing sort of what is coming out of the caliper. I don't know if you remember back a few years ago, they used to have that blue fluid, which was super fun because you could see it coming out of the caliper. It would go from dark to amber to blue, and then you knew you were done. So at least this is going to be a lot lighter than what's currently in there. As I said, once we had a setup in here, I'd show you with a little better lighting. So the power bleeder, we'll say that's their catch container. I mean, you can do whatever for this. You can just put a tube down to a drain pan. I mean, whatever you want to do is fine. I got these with the kit just to try them out and see. They are branded to work, and they work pretty well. The tube fits over the bleeder there. I have a 10 millimeter on there ready to go, and then my light just so I can keep an eye on it. If you are somebody that knows of a decent wireless work light, I am in need of a new one. This one's just seen its day, so I'm looking for something new like that, a nice rechargeable, durable. So my first move is to go up to under the hood and add some pressure, and from there just come back here and crack the bleeder, and we should see it start to go. See it starting to work its way down there. It is very clear, which is cool. Keep adding my pressure here. With a little bit of pressure on there, we're at about, I don't know, 12 PSI. I think that's reading there. Got fluid in the line here, enough. And what we do then is go to the back. You can see this did start to fill up a little bit more. We're going to go to the back and we crack the bleeder, and fluid should start coming out because there's pressure on the system, and it's just going to come right out the weakest link, which should be right here. Let's give this a go and see what happens. There it goes. It's actually not that dirty. I really was expecting a lot worse. It very well could have been just dirty up in the master cylinder, but we'll cycle all this stuff through the line at least and work our way around. Don't want to say I spoke too soon, but you can see in the bottom it's pretty gross. I've seen worse, and obviously we've seen better. It just slowly trickles out of there. You kind of keep an eye on the pressure gauge up there. Just make sure it has a little pressure and pumps the new stuff through, and that's pretty much it. It's very simple. Now we're getting somewhere. Look at that. Let me turn that so you can see without the label in the way. All that was in the system, and now it's out. Replaced with the good stuff. I will say this is a more intimidating job because safety comes into mind for, you know, the average person. This is one of those things you're like, yeah, no, I'm not touching that. As long as you keep fluid up in that main reservoir, you can do this. You don't need a pressure bleeder. You can really just do it with a bottle up there and just kind of doing the run back and forth method, making sure it's full. And it's basically like a gravity bleed. It just kind of comes out and it works its way out of there. And even if you do just, let's say, one wheel at a time, you tackle one wheel, you put it back together, go test it, okay, I'm good. Then you go to the next one, do the same thing. You slowly do that. I mean, heck, you could do it over the course of a whole summer and cycle through, and by the time you're done, you'd cycle out almost all the old stuff and have fresh fluid in there. So it's a pretty worthwhile job to do, I'd say. What's nice about these little things is once you take it off, it's kind of no mess. You put the hose back on top there, it drips in there, and there you go. What's funny is you let this stuff sit, you'll kind of see it settle. I mean, almost, I had one time it came out, it looked like a layered dessert or something in there after it sat for a while. But you can see this isn't as nice as the new stuff, which these bottles are very similar in translucency. You can see the new over there in the bleeder versus the old here. So how about that? It's nice and out of the system. And now that this is off, I over there retighten the bleeder screw, and this will just sit here. This is fine, and we can do the other wheels and work our way around. Quick look at the passenger side. Same story. Fluid doesn't look horrible in the tube, but then when you add it all up in there, it's pretty gross. So we're moving right along here, cycling out the old stuff. And then finally, I'll give you a quick look at the front here. Coming out pretty nasty looking. As much as the back lines are longer, in my opinion, the front setup is just as important, if not more important, because the front does the majority of your braking in almost every car. Sometimes it's equal, but you can see this nasty old fluids coming out of there. Right out the top there. Same 10mm, just right there. So going through the fronts here and getting that done, and that should get us covered for the most part. Okay, so immediately after I wrapped up that last wheel, I think I was doing, the car was backwards. I did the driver's side, I don't remember which side I did last. One of the fronts I did last. You know, if you time it right, your speed bleeder, you can basically kind of run it out into there or get it pretty darn close. From there, I made sure my level was good in the master cylinder, which it was pretty close. And then I did a little bit of just driving around town, making sure everything was okay. Didn't do anything too aggressive. We had a track day coming up like 3 days later, and I wanted to sort of just make sure everything was on the up and up before and during the track day, which it was. Fluid held up perfectly on the track. Not that there was any abuse or I mean, honestly, I just got this car and I didn't want to wreck it the first few months here, so I pretty much just took it easy, got through the track day, you know, saw what its limits were, that sort of thing, and then kind of drove it home and cleaned it here. But I've had these two sitting here for a while, and I was just curious what would happen. Now, this one right here is one of the early ones, and you can see it sort of settles after a while. It didn't settle that much, but as we got farther along through the system, this was one of the last ones I did, and you could tell almost as it was coming through the tube how it would, it almost got clearer as it went through. So you can sort of tell if your brake fluid's really dirty as you're bleeding this, almost if you watch your drain tube or whatever you want to call it, your bleeder tube there, that'll sort of show you. Now, for you know, the people out there that say, well, you should have done a full flush. You should have, you know, cycled more through. You should have cleaned your master cylinder more. I mean, because if you look here at this, it's not exactly clean looking by any means. Even if we take the top off here, it still looks dirty. My defense in that, or how I operate, is it's better than it was. Did I do a full flush? No. But I think, honestly, I have 97% of the old stuff out and that stuff in there. I didn't address or touch the master cylinder, or the ABS module, which is down there. That has different, cylinders and pistons and things like that in there, where you have to sort of actuate it to flush it. I'm pretty sure at my track day there were a few times where active handling kicked on, competition mode was run, that whole thing. So it definitely cycled through that fluid. Some of the people either have to have a Tech 2 or some device that actually actuates those pistons, or some people just say go on some snow or a gravel road and just lock up your wheels so your ABS kicks on. But either way, the Redline fluid, amazing stuff. It worked really well at the track. No sign of boiling or overheating, and it shouldn't, because it is brand new and it shouldn't have any issues. But I am super excited to have all this nasty junk out of there and have it filled with good fancy stuff. That's some really nice fluid. So I'll put a link below to that if you're interested. I don't know if I would run it in my clutch. From what I've seen is a lot of clutch fluids, they recommend just a standard non-synthetic. And a lot of times same with the brakes, but I think this fluid is kind of an X factor. It's really nice stuff, and it has a very high boiling point, and it seems to be pretty durable for daily use and track use. So thank you for watching. More on this car to come. That procedure, though, does work for everything. So if you have a car that's very similar, or whatever, power bleeding works roughly the same on everything. So I'll put a link below to sort of everything I used, most importantly the brake fluid, because Redline did send that over to trial and error and run it through the car. Big shout out to them, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and subscribe for more content on the Corvette or any product reviews here at Rubber City Motoring.